What's up guys, I'm Nico of CAMCRUNCH, and in today's video I'm going to answer a question that I get asked pretty often, and it's because I put that video up. It was my second video on this channel, I think, and it was on aperture, shutter speed, and ISO and how they combine together to get, you know, the exposure of your image. But one thing that I failed to mention was how do you measure the exposure, how you find out what the exposure of a certain scene should be. And there are many tools that help you in trying to figure out what the proper exposure should be, but in the end it's really up to you. You know, sometimes these tools that help you measure your exposure tell you certain settings, but the image doesn't end up looking good. You might want to overexpose or underexpose a bit. So in the end it's up to you. But again, there are these tools that help you try to figure out where your exposure should be, and one of them is the built-in light meter in your camera, and that's something that a lot of people look past, especially when you're starting off. I know that when I first started off, I jumped into manual mode, but I didn't even use the built-in light meter in the camera. I just jumped straight in and started guessing my settings, and I did learn from there, but it would have been much simpler if I just looked at the light meter once in a while to try to get a rough estimate of what my exposure should be. So that's really what I'm going to talk about in this video today, how to use your built-in light meter in your camera. So now we're looking at the back of a DSLR camera. This is the back of a Canon T3I, and what you see right here is your meter. So this sort of number line scale thing. And if I half click, you'll see that little dot underneath the numbers, and that is where your camera's exposure is right now. And it's very simple to understand the meter. At 0 is when you have correct exposure based on what your camera thinks. If it's on 1, that's 1 stop overexposed, 2 is 2 stops, 3 is 3 stops, and then it's the same for negative. So -1 is 1 stop underexposed, 2 stops underexposed, and then 3 stops underexposed. And if it's more than that, it will just stay at the maximum, of course. So again, right now the camera thinks that the image is 2 stops overexposed, and this is based on the evaluative metering mode, which you will see down here. And I have a whole video on metering modes, so I'll put the link to that in the description box down below. But basically, this is the evaluative metering mode, which is what your camera is set at when you first get it, and that means that it will meter for the whole scene and try to balance the exposure out to middle gray. So it gets all the light information and tries to balance it out to middle gray, and that's how it will tell you what your proper exposure should be. So again, I just want to clarify that using the metering mode, using the light meter isn't sort of your final way of getting exposure. Again, it all comes down to what you see in the end and what you want from the image, but this is a good guide to show you how the exposure should be. So again, it's under 2 right now, so that means it's 2 stops overexposed. So what I want to do is increase the shutter speed, or close down the aperture, so increase the f-stop number, or I can lower the ISO in order to get that to where the camera thinks it should be, which is 0. But what I'm going to do right now is just play with my shutter speed. So I'm going to increase my shutter speed, and you can see that the dot on the bottom is slowly moving to 0. And once it gets to 0, that's where your camera's exposure meter is at. So that's what it thinks the correct exposure should be. So again, I'll move it to like 2 and show you the image. So right now it's fluctuating because, as you can see back there, I have a window behind, so it's backlit, which throws off the exposure sometimes. So I'll put it back to 1/1/6, which was what it was in a while ago. I'll take the image, and as you can see, it is like overexposed because of that light in the back. Now I'll make it so that it's at 0, so 1/125th. Actually, it's underexposed right now. 120. Let's try 115. Actually, let's try 120. Take that picture. As you can see, the exposure is much better. Let's look at those 2 images. So this is the second image. This is the first image, and you can see the exposure change dramatically. But again, that's backlit. So depending on the balance of light that you want on the the item itself, you might wanna overexpose that image actually, because when you have something so bright, you know, the light meter tries to balance that out to middle gray, the whole image to middle gray, and when it's overpowered by light, sometimes your subject's actually left in the dark. It doesn't have enough fill light, so sometimes you want to overexpose. But right now, the exposure that the camera is giving is, you know, it's pretty good. You can see that Canon logo pretty clearly. And yeah, so again, that's how the meter works. Now let's purposely underexpose just to show you guys how it works. So when it says it's 2 stops underexposed, you take the image, it's going to be too dark. So again, you can use this light meter, just try to bring it to the center, and that's going to give you a guide. And again, I want to just say this one last time, the light meter is just a guide, and in the end, the exposure is really up to you. You know, the light meter isn't correct. It gives you what the camera thinks is correct based on, you know, algorithms that's programmed into the camera. But again, in the end, it's up to you to determine what your exposure should be. But this is, you know, one useful tool to help you out. And a lot of people really don't look at the light meter when they first start. They just, you know, put the camera in manual and they just start guessing and trying things out, which is good, but you know, it's good to guess based on a guide. So this is your guide, and then you can take it from there, learn how to use, learn how to read light further, you know, learn the lighting in different situations. But you know, the light meter again is a very good guide to help you understand, you know, what your exposure might be. So again, I'm Nico of CAMCRUNCH, and I'll see you guys in the next video.